I was sitting there and I heard a woman's voice in my head. And I looked, and there's this woman sitting across from me. She was looking at me. And right when I looked up and saw her, she looked away. And the voice in my head said, "Oh my God, he just saw me. I'm embarrassed. I wonder if he saw me looking." And I was like, this is nuts. Did I just pick up on this woman's thoughts? Like, this is so crazy.
This is an emergency broadcast. This is not a test.
Welcome everybody to the show. Thank you so much for joining us again for a new episode. Really excited about this one. Today we have an individual on who is going to be speaking about something that directly happened to them. A lot of what we talk about on the show has experts on, has people who've analyzed data, but rarely do you get someone who wants to come on and talk about an experience that directly happened to them. It does happen, but if you get into these subjects, generally speaking, people can be a little bit hesitant to talk about it because they're going to be worried about being judged, rightly so. A lot of this stuff is pretty out there. So it's hard for people to come on and then once they're on, be able to articulate the subject we're talking about clearly and tell their story. So it's something we want to do more of on the podcast. We want to have people on who've experienced something, who've had something happen to them, whether it's a haunting, a paranormal event, psychic ability, UFO phenomenon, a survival situation. It doesn't matter what it is, but we're interested to have those people on. So if you know anybody or you want to come on or you're interested in talking about something, email us, get the ball rolling, podcast@dadsdoomsdayguide.com, podcast@dadsdoomsdayguide.com, and we just may have you on the show. A few housekeeping items before we get started. If you would like to leave us a review and you enjoy what you're hearing, please do so on whatever podcasting platform you may be listening on. It helps us grow. It helps us get the word out. And who doesn't like to see a lot of reviews on something that you go see? I do it on Amazon all the time. Whatever has the most reviews, I tend to buy it first. So if you guys can do that for us, we would greatly appreciate it. It helps us get the word out and can continue to grow and to continue to attract guests on the program. If you would like to support the show in other ways, you can check us out on Patreon, where it will continually evolve as we add more items to bring value to you guys. So we're looking at things like merchandise. Tim hates the word merch, so I said merchandise. But things like shirts and mugs, I'm actually checking that out right now. If it's something that's popular, we'll have more versions. Tim and I actually really like a shirt that we get through a website called, I think, Zero Foxtrot. And they have some kind of wild different shirts, and they're like some military guys, I believe, that started that. They fit really well. They're really cool graphics. Obviously, it probably won't be to that extreme, depending on what we're talking about, because if you do look that up, you'll see kind of the variety of shirts they have. But it's something we like, so we're trying to find out some good shorts, some good graphics we could put on those things. So we'll let you know about that. But also extra interviews and also maybe some extra Q&A with guests that we have on the program. So we're looking at bringing some more stuff. So again, if you want to check us out, we greatly appreciate it. Lastly, check us out on social media. If you haven't, TikTok, we're still there. It's still functioning in the United States. So you can still watch a lot of clips there that we post. That is going to be at Dad's Doomsday Guide, at Dad's Doomsday Guide on TikTok, and on Twitter, which is now X, it's going to be at Doomsday Dads, at Doomsday Dads. I just looked at them, so I think I'm right. So check us out. Follow us. We're trying to build Twitter up. So if you're on Twitter or if you're on X, I'm sorry, please do follow us. I know it's not the same in terms of the algorithm and the way it pushes out videos. So on TikTok, it's been a lot easier to build a following. But we are trying to build it out on Twitter because you never know what's down the pipe for them, what they're going to reveal in terms of supporting video and supporting podcasts. So if you're on there, follow us. Today's guest is Asim Kaleem. He is an actor and photographer aspiring to convey profound narratives through his creative endeavors. Along with writing and directing, Asim is deeply rooted in self-improvement and the healing arts. Today, he's here to tell us all about his transformative experience where he used meditation to access a higher level of consciousness. It's a fascinating story. I hope you guys enjoy. To start off, kind of, I guess if you could introduce yourself to people, who you are, kind of, I know our discussion when I met you at the gym and we're talking about meditation and kind of getting in touch with like that inner voice, and you kind of have a pretty wild story that you were telling me, and I was like, oh man, we got to get more into this. So I guess, yeah, kind of introduce yourself and then we can kind of get into what happened to you.
My name is Asim Kaleem. I guess you could say identify as a father, husband, also, as a storyteller. I'm a car enthusiast. I've studied acting. I've studied performing arts. I've directed a few projects. I've done stand-up. So I like to just consider myself as an artist. And I'm just very deeply connected to spirituality.
Now, for me, it's been something that's evolved over my life. I was born and raised Catholic. I still practice, raise my kids that way, but it's shifted a lot in terms of what I view the possible truth to be. I know it's impossible for any of us to know until we die and we actually see what's there, if anything. But I've come to be more of a religions are different ways up the mountain kind of to truth and trying to figure out what that is. And depending on where you're born in the world and what you're exposed to, you're going to have a different path maybe to that eventual truth. And I look at, near-death experiences, people's experiences on DMT as kind of windows into what potentially may be. When you talk about consciousness and the universal reality of the world and what's there. Now, when we were talking, it was interesting because I believe you mentioned it was meditation, and you can say which type it was and kind of what tapped you into kind of that inner voice. And I think people search for that. They're searching for what their calling is, what they're here for. If you believe in that kind of thing, if you're like kind of a branch off of God or consciousness or whatever is in you, and like what you're here for, what you're here to learn. I believe everybody has a talent they could be really good at and excel, but it's really hard for people to find what that is. And I feel like you and some other people have kind of been able to tap into that voice and kind of you start hearing something. Now, I guess take it from the top because no one knows anything about this story, but how did you get into the meditation? And then what did you start to experience and kind of, I guess, lay out for us what we were talking about at the gym?
At a young age, very young age, I lost my father, right? I was born in Pakistan, and, he's my hero. And I lost him at a very young age. So as I grew up, there was a lot of kind of longing for, something greater. And for me, that really became my obsession with the idea of love, the concept of love, like what is love? You see romantic love on TV, you see families, fathers and mothers, loving their children. And so I kind of obsessed with that, and a lot of my reading, a lot of my, searching was on that topic. And in that search, I stumbled upon some things that really, really kind of said, like how you can experience that feeling of love, right? And I think back in 2009, or no, I think it was 2010 or 2011, I started searching the topic. And of course, when you talk about love, right, you get into that family love that one has for their parent or child, and then that romantic love, right? And typically the thing that I guess is connected with that romantic love is your sexuality, right? So I knew for me that topic was something that, and it is for a lot of people, that is, something that we haven't really explored too much. And, they talk about sexuality a lot. And I ended up around that time looking up on Google how I can transform or transmute, and, when you type certain things in search engines, you find certain things, right? Mm-hmm. So I stumbled upon this topic called sexual transmutation. Mm-hmm. And first I just kind of glancing at it really quick, I'm like, what's that? Like what's sexual transmutation? Mm-hmm. Like, is it like changing your sex or something? So it kind of piqued my interest, but then the writer was very sophisticated in his style. And I'm sure you've heard of him, and anybody listening to this, I'm sure they've heard of Napoleon Hill.
Name's familiar.
Yeah, he's a great writer on pretty much like the law. He's like the grandfather of like laws of attraction, basically.
Okay.
And so he was, I discovered that, and he talks about how much energy and power we have in that energy center, which is, located at the base of the spine. And so I said, okay, cool. Let me see what he has to say. And he started talking about how we can transform that energy into something greater, a greater power. So, I read that, and then I went into reading a great book by Chad Ting called Search Inside Yourself. He's one of the original engineers at Google, and he wrote a book on meditation, which is a great book. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it to everyone. It's very practical. And so I started doing these meditation exercises, right? They say the root cause of suffering is grasping or averting. So with that in mind, I said, okay, everything that I do, I'm going to just ask myself, am I grasping or am I averting, right? Am I holding on to something or am I not letting something go? And with all those things combined, I actually accidentally stumbled upon like this awakening, this kind of feeling where like everything just felt beautiful. Everything just felt really, really pure. And then the consciousness got to a point where you could kind of transcend like time and space, which was really remarkable. So I think that's the story that I shared with you. Mm-hmm. And I think that's when you got a little interested and you were saying, before we fainted in the sauna, you said, we should talk more about this.
Yeah, for sure. Now, when you talk about, because I've come across a few people and guests who do practice meditation. Other people have done other things to kind of access that kind of higher level of consciousness. When you're talking about the type of meditation that you were doing, now was it, since there's so many, and I'm kind of, I was starting to try again, and then I was like, you get distracted. But what type, I guess specifically, were you doing? Were you sitting down quietly, music? Were you mantra type stuff? What were you doing, I guess, to start that process of meditation, or was it something different and not the same traditional concepts that we think about?
Well, I mean, I do the very, very simple meditation, which is just focusing on your breath. So if you do it right now, right, and you just kind of breathe in, you kind of hear that noise, right? Right. So you focus on that noise and you put your awareness to your nose or to your chest, right? Wherever you feel that air going in. Mm-hmm. So it would look something like, and then, obviously when you do that, you start, hey, so, I wonder what I have to do later. I got to do, that comes up, right?
Yeah.
And so when that comes up, right, you can be very gentle with it. And you can just kind of say, okay, I hear you and I appreciate that, but let's just go back to focusing on the breath. So you just keep doing that. And the more you do it, it's like lifting weights. It's like doing a bicep curl, right? Mm-hmm. The more you do it, the easier it gets. And basically what you're doing is you're training that part of your brain. I think it's called the amygdala, which is like the monkey brain, to just quiet down and allow yourself to just kind of be in this stillness. Once you start that meditation, right, and you practice that daily, it's going to be difficult, and then you're going to notice that it could go from like 5 seconds of stillness to, 5 minutes, right? And so you have to practice that a lot and you have to take baby steps. But once you get into that, there's a lot of other things, right? You go from that stillness to, different areas of your body, which means like once you master that breath, then you might say, hey, I'm going to put my focus on my heart. I'm going to put my focus on, my back. I'm going to put that focus on my stomach, my legs, right? So then you start controlling that awareness, right? So first it's the stillness, then it's controlling the awareness. Then once you get into that, maybe you might want to do, meditating in motion, right? Which I was really fond of. That's like when you're doing cardio or running on the treadmill, you try to focus on stillness while you're doing something active.
When you talk about focusing on a particular area of your body, now are you holding like an image in your mind about what kind of you're focusing on, or is it just like an awareness of a certain location? How would you describe that? Holding that thought without, your mind kind of ping, 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 a heartbeat. Oh, look at the heart, a cardiovascular veins. Oh, well, doctor books, and it starts chain reaction and all these random thoughts. How would you describe, I guess, that focus that you're talking about?
The focus is similar to when you do something where you get into like the state of flow. I'm sure you've experienced it, you've heard of it, but I think being in a state of flow is when your peak engagement, meets like your peak performance of that activity. So for example, if you're focusing on, like, say, your heart, right? And you focus on it so much and the heart is beating, it's like you get to a point where it's like a laser beam focus and everything else just kind of falls apart, or falls away. That's connected with that. Right. Mm-hmm. So you might, like, as you described, you might have a sense of saying, hey, I remember this, or I remember that. But as you gently come back to that stillness, you'll notice things will get quieter and quieter and quieter. And basically what it's like is it's like sitting on your computer with 100 windows open, right? If you're lucky enough to have a good computer that can do that, right? which a lot of people are, that have a lot of those thoughts going on, right? They're doing like a million things. And it's literally closing all those windows down until you just have like a blank screen, maybe in like your Word documents or something. And that's when you go, oh, wow, that's really cool. Now I can create from this empty space.
Okay. So then you progress to this portion, and then you said you progress to the kind of stillness and motion when you're able to do other activities, but still be kind of centered. And then once you were able to master that, then what was the next step for you? And what, I guess, because we're building up to that, I guess that voice, but was that a goal of yours? I mean, were you looking to kind of access, were you looking for that universal consciousness, whatever that is, to come through you to be kind of give you some direction? I mean, what was your goal? Or were you just kind of seeing where it was going?
Yeah, no, actually I wasn't trying to achieve anything, as far as like a higher state of consciousness. To be quite honest, I was literally just doing it for health reasons.
Okay.
I literally was like, you know what? I want to eat healthy. I want to do good. I just want to challenge myself. So at the moment I was doing these, meditation exercises, I was also partaking in a thing, called Athlean X. I don't know if you're obviously you are into fitness.
I haven't heard of that though. What's that?
If you go online and type in Athlean X, you'll find a gentleman named Jeff Cavalier. He's just completely ripped. He's just in service to everyone, trying to get everyone to be fit and healthy. And I was following his program.
Okay.
Right. So I'm following his program, I'm trying to get healthy. And one of the things that he recommended was doing interval training. And as far as cardio went, one of the things he was suggesting was, hey, don't try to run or jog for like 30 minutes. You can shorten that by sprinting for 30 seconds and then jogging for 30 seconds, sprinting for 30 seconds. And, you repeat that, right, for 5 minutes, 10 minutes. So I started doing that. And while I was doing these energy practices, these meditative practices, and I started getting on the treadmill and I just started sprinting, I'm talking about like 14, 15, 16 miles an hour, right, for 30 seconds.
Man.
And what had happened was I started, taking in really deep breaths, right? So, when you run really, really fast, when you stop, you're like, right? So that combined with meditation, combined with healthy eating, and with energy cultivation, it really unlocked a part of me that I didn't expect.
And did that come to you? I mean, if I'm skipping anything, feel free to go back and kind of bridge the gap. But did that come to you during an exercise, or did it come to you during a meditation? That awareness that you kind of hit that point.
I'm going to back it up a little bit, and some people might know what this is. I found out later what I had stumbled upon, but one of the things you can look into is, have you heard the term Kundalini? Yes. You have, right? Uh-huh. So if you kind of listen to what I'm saying and you kind of read about, the awakening of Kundalini, you'll start seeing kind of where the patterns are coming in. And I had no idea what this was at the time, but, in Kundalini yoga, they do very deep breathing exercises, right?
Okay, yeah.
So I was stumbling upon that accidentally, and I had no clue. right? So every day I'm getting out there and I'm just sprinting and I'm, and eventually what happened was I just kind of felt this energy in my heart. I just felt this kind of like feeling, like this tightness in my chest. And I just couldn't describe it. I didn't really know what to do. I had just gotten out of a relationship and I felt so disturbed at the time that the only thing that brought me comfort was trying to focus on people that didn't have it as good as me, if that makes any sense. So, there's a lot of homeless people in LA. And I kind of felt like if I helped some homeless people, that it would alleviate my suffering. Right. So, you walk by homeless people and a lot of times homeless people, they kind of look like crackheads. Right. And what's kind of like the feeling you have, you're like, I don't want to give him money because he looks like he might, do crack with it. Right. But at that time, I kind of realized, I said, you know what, let me just help as much as I can. And I started helping people. And the feeling was just so beautiful, where it's kind of like, no matter what they're asking money for, they need help. Right. And so after kind of just spending time, giving money, helping out, I felt that energy right here, like elevated a little bit. And that's when it started getting interesting.
Now, is that something that once you felt that elevation, you're kind of like, you're feeling good, you're helping others, you're kind of like discovering this kind of new part of yourself. And we can, I guess if we want to get into the voice part of it now, or that feeling that something's giving you guidance, is that something you kind of had to go into a meditation about, or is this now happening when you are just everyday functioning, doing different activities? How did it first, I guess, present itself to you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So once we've done all that, we're not trying to go after anything. We're not, we're simply just being, right? With these certain practices. And I started going out into public and stuff. And I started noticing that I was receiving more messages that were very unusual. So for example, when I'd be sitting there, I'll give you an example. I was at a coffee shop, which is now closed. Unfortunately, I drove by, it's in Torrance. I was sitting there and I heard a woman's voice in my head. And have you seen the movie, What Women Want with Mel Gibson?
Yes. Yeah, it's great. It's a great movie.
It's a great movie, right?
Yeah.
And I know, even saying this, people are going to kind of think like I'm crazy, but I started hearing things. And it was like, kind of like, you could hear somebody's voice in your head. Right. So I looked up and there's this woman sitting across from me. She was looking at me. And right when I looked up and saw her, she looked away and the voice in my head said, oh my God, he just saw me. I'm embarrassed. I wonder if he saw me looking.
That's crazy.
And I was like, this is nuts. Did I just pick up on this woman's thoughts? Like, this is so crazy. And, little things like that just kept happening. And it was just so interesting.
And now I know you described to me when you were, I think you said you were a waiter. If I'm correct? And you had some moments there where it was almost like your intuition was like through the roof because you were getting things before they were happening. Can you describe that a little bit? And then after that, could you differentiate between that voice, like the intuition type voice, and what you're getting versus, perceiving what they're thinking? Like how are you seeing those two things differently in your head?
Yeah. So once you kind of get into this state, right, this state, the best way to describe it is there is the selfish state, right? What do I want? My needs. What am I going to do? And then there is this state of like being in service. And the funny thing is, I was in service at the time, being an actor, a performing artist. I was working a night job in Beverly Hills, West Hollywood, at a steakhouse called Boa Steakhouse. And, I mean, this place is magnificent. And, people like Tom Cruise, Brad Pitt, Steven Spielberg dine there. So it was really an interesting place. Right. And so when I was working there, I was living this embodiment of like being in service to others. And so as I'd be meditating in motion, just doing my thing, this kind of intuitive voice would come in, right? Like, do this. And a lot of times when this voice comes in, it's like a very slight whisper. And when I say whisper, I mean, like, you probably have a million things going on in your head right now, or when you're doing, when you're going about your day, this whisper might be like, make a left. Right. Okay. And, you're saying you're going to go pick up your kids or something, and you have to make a right, but the voice might say, make a left. Right. And it's such a gentle voice. And usually what we do is we rationalize, right? We say, well, if I make a left, where am I going to go? I don't even know where I'm going. I got to make a right because I know, it's kind of like that, right?
Yeah, shut up, voice. I'm going this way.
Yeah, I'm going this way. And then, you kind of are having like, someone told me once, her name was Dallas Travers. She said, when we rationalize, we tell ourselves rational lies. And I just will never forget that line. And so, you have to kind of trust that voice. So as an example, I know I'm talking so much, but
no, it's good.
In this particular day, I was grabbing bread, right? And my table needed 2 pieces of bread, right? So I was grabbing 2 pieces of bread. And then right when I grabbed the second piece, this voice goes, grab 2 more. And I'm like, in my mind, I was like, I don't need 2 more, but I just grabbed 2 more. Right. And so I grabbed 2 more, and then I start walking, and, then it gets to a point where you're just having fun, right? You're just like, kind of like having fun with this voice, like what's going to happen next? So I'm like walking, and then as soon as I get out, one of my colleagues comes up. He's like, Asim, I'm so sorry. Hey bro, I know you're busy, but I can't get to my table. They just need 2 pieces of bread. Can you just, go check in on them? And I looked at him and I was like, sure, of course. And he's like, thanks, man. You're great. So I walk over there and I put these 2 pieces of bread on their table, and they're like, thank you so much. That was so quick. You guys are amazing. I'm like, you're welcome. Right. And then the voice literally goes, put the plate down. And so I'm looking at them and I'm like, putting the plate down, and it goes, turn around. And I go, excuse me 1 second, right? I have no idea what's going on. I'm like, excuse me 1 second. I turn around and they're looking at me like, what's he doing? And this woman trips as she's walking by me. She's walking by me and she trips. And I caught her like right in front of everyone. And I swear it was like a scene out of a movie where everybody's like, oh, wow, like this guy just brought bread in like 10 seconds, and like he just saved this woman from falling on her face. So, you start having little things like that, and life just becomes so much more enjoyable.
How would you describe that? Is it like the thought you heard of the woman where you heard her thoughts? Or is this just like you have this feeling inside your body? Like I think we've all had that at some point. Maybe we brush it off, but a feeling that's so strong that you're so confident that it's correct that it's like when you say turn left, it's like, it's that feeling. It's like, this wasn't a thought that's just, I'm actually thinking here. This is something coming from somewhere else, and it's like a deep feeling. And I guess that's what people would describe as intuition. Now, would you classify it more as like that, or was it an actual voice that says, turn around, put the plate down, that kind of stuff? How would you guys classify that?
Well, I mean, just to kind of center it into our conversation and some of the things we've talked about before, personally, I think that concept is faith. And I think that's what all the religious texts try to convey, is having faith. And once you stumble upon faith, and not the idea of faith, like I have faith, I believe in God, or I believe, but once you embody it, where you can go do something and have no clue what's next, but just be so committed to it 100% and have faith in that feeling or thought or idea. I think that is like a higher intelligence than what most people are used to.
So would you feel like you're tapping into, because you've been able to knock out all the noise around you, all like the monkey brain stuff that's telling you, survival, this is what you need to do, eat, sleep, whatever, that you've knocked all that out at such a high level that you're able to tap into this stream. I mean, I don't know what you believe in terms of consciousness and how that feeds into us, whether we're an antenna that's like a body that's just holding onto the soul basically, and then it goes back after we're done. However, you kind of work that into your own framework of reality. Do you believe like you're tapping into whatever that is? And that's kind of giving you insight into making your life easier. Because one of the things with Bernardo, when I interviewed him and I sent you that interview, kind of to show what we talk about on the show sometimes, is that he was saying like you have to accept to go with the flow of life. Like stop fighting it, stop trying to do everything that you want to do. Like right, maybe living selfishly would be the way that you would kind of articulate that, and just go with the flow of life. And you can get into a rhythm, and life is much more fun that way. And you're kind of going with the flow. Maybe it's not freedom as in the term that we think of it is, but you're not fighting whatever is going to happen. You know what I mean? Like, and it gets kind of dicey with free will and stuff, but do you think you're tapping into whatever that is?
Yeah, definitely. I think that words are powerful to such a degree that we get lost in them. And I think because of the fact that we think, we tend to limit ourselves to past events. When people talk about trauma and all that stuff. And I think really when you meditate and you increase your energy levels to the point where all your, faculties can function correctly, I think you get to a point where you do transcend, consciousness in that sense, where you can actually perceive things past time and space, right? So, you see everything right now, you see technology, they're doing things and going to the moon. And, I think India just landed on the moon recently, right? And they're harvesting stuff, that all that stuff is done because, they've been able to utilize certain elements and put them together, right? Well, consciousness, I believe, is something that, you can either use to travel into the past memory, or I think you can actually use it to really, really be grounded in the moment that you are, right? But I think most people, they aren't. Most people are, of course, as they say, they're living in the past or in the future. Right. Like, and I think that's the biggest issue. I think that people have, I think that's the root of like all the problems we have in the world right now.
And I think that's kind of where we left off in the gym, was that you kind of talked to this and I said, well, do you still do this now? Or did it get to a point where you had to like stop? And I think you said, oh, that's we'll have to continue that part of the conversation. And did it ever get, and I think I asked you this, did it ever get worrisome or scary? Or did you ever be like, was it too much? Was it like, hey, this is weirding me out a little bit too much? And then I guess if you could talk a little bit about that, and then what made you keep doing it or stop this, I guess, accessing this thing?
You just asked some of the best questions, honestly.
It's coming from curiosity, because like you're talking about this and I'm like, man, this is crazy. This is so cool because it's like a practical, it's actually happened to you, it's not like you just heard this from somebody or something. It's like it happened to you,
Yeah. It's pretty crazy because, when you get into that state of consciousness, everything feels like you're on ecstasy or you're like high. Like, I'm sure you've heard of, when people talk about spirituality and higher consciousness, they talk about joy and they talk about pleasure, right? And I really struggled with that. I never really knew what the difference was. Like, okay, well, joy and pleasure, right? But I realized that when you get to that higher state of consciousness, everything, like you love everything. Everything is just pure bliss. Like you do something nice and you're like, oh my God, it just feels so great to do something nice. You look at a sunset and you start crying. You're like, the sunset is so beautiful, And it's funny because I got to that point and I think I became very ambitious spiritually. Like I was like, yeah, I'm ready, like I can do anything, like I have extrasensory perception now, I have this unlimited stream of consciousness that I can tap into. I could literally talk about anything at that time, right? And wow myself when I go back to listen to what I had just said. But what happened was, I think I didn't have any real guidance in the sense of like, feedback from people that I really trusted. It was like I was doing it alone. And I kind of think I really went down this kind of like weird rabbit hole where it's like, I'd meet people and I was like talking about consciousness and everything. And they're just like, dude, I just want to have a drink and like talk about politics, And so, and it's funny because the universe works in mysterious ways. I met a young gal, and her name is Jasmine. And if you try to look me up, you can probably find her stuff. But she came into my life and I said, okay, well, let me try to help this person. Right. And she drove me nuts. I mean, she literally I later found out was borderline schizophrenic. And I think she is schizophrenic. And it was really interesting because I asked myself for many, many years why this happened to me. And, they say that, I'm sure you've heard that, your vibration, your frequency attracts, the same vibration, right? Like if you're negative and you're angry, you're going to attract negative, angry people. You're going to get into fights. If you're love and light and, all that stuff, or money conscious, you're going to attract that. Well, I attracted a woman into my life that was schizophrenic. And later on, I discovered that when you get really deep into these practices, there's a fine line between like awakening and schizophrenia. And they go hand in hand. And so I think the universe brought her to me to kind of pull me back and ground me, because my head was like up in the air. Like I was like, I felt like some guru or something, you know what I mean? And it was kind of scary, to be quite honest with you. And this woman, she has been stalking me for, I would say, 11 years now. She's been stalking me. Yeah.
That's still going on?
Yeah. I mean, it's died down a little bit, but I still get the random emails and, online profile, paragraphs that she'll leave me.
Oh, geez, man. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Trudging up. Yeah. That kind of stuff. That's no fun. That's no fun at all. No, would you say, when you said it got kind of scary, would you say because you were kind of not kind of drunk off your own power? I wouldn't, that's kind of a strong term when you're talking about, because you're servicing others and it's a more of a selfless thing, but were you finding it that you were too reliant on it? Or were you finding, was there any other messages that were ever confusing? Not that they were harmful, but like, you get into that realm, like, and I'm sure you're very well versed on it too, is like religion, when you get into like certain parts of like demons and like bad spiritual energy. And like some people say, even people who don't buy into like the traditional God and everything, they say, well, you have to be careful when you access this stuff because you don't quite know what you're getting into in that kind of realm, right? There's could be things there that energy wise that just aren't but conducive or don't necessarily want the same things you want. And you can kind of start getting mixed messages. I've heard some people tell me that it was people doing like this kind of automatic writing were getting kind of messages that weren't telling them the truth and causing kind of some strife in their life. Did you ever experience any of that? Or was it just simply that you were getting too high up in the clouds and too kind of like confident in this kind of power, for lack of a better term, that you were kind of accessing?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I would say that, there are a lot of different powers that are much greater than us and way more powerful than what you can imagine. And I guess the best way I can relate it is once, having a child, right, who's 1.5 years old, he runs around, he walks up to people, he's like, hi, hello, right? Like we'll be out and, I'm just sitting at the beach and he just like runs up to like a group of girls and I'm like, oh my God, so I have to walk over there and be like, I'm so sorry, and he's like taking their stuff. So it's like once as a human being, once you learn to walk and talk, right, you start meeting people, right? And people that are smarter than you. And he can go up to somebody and grab their hand and they can start walking with him, and they could be very kind and sweet, or they can kidnap him, right? And it's the same thing when you tap into this realm and you start doing your spiritual practices, and you can kind of see beyond the veil of reality. There are different entities there that are ready, and they're like, hey, welcome, And so for me at the time, being single and not being grounded, there's an element of like, you always want to kind of do something that might, like, hey, there's a woman, like, let me go meet her. Let me like hang out with her. So I noticed that if my thoughts were impure at all, I would attract these energies. And those energies were really scary. Conversely, when I had very pure, selfless thoughts, this very like, beautiful, white energy would, come by. So if you ever had that negative thought and you can perceive those energies, it's very scary. And I think I got to a point where I just said, I don't want to see this, because, maybe my thoughts weren't 100% selfless at some times. You know what I mean?
Now, would you describe that, because you could get into we cover stuff on the paranormal things, and it's such a deep rabbit hole to go into. And you don't necessarily know, like, to your point, like, there's different people in the world who have different mental issues. And it's like, it can get kind of like, you don't know what to believe really, but I think there's enough there. Even you're using your experience too. Is there enough there that there's something there, right? When people describe kind of hauntings or different things, and, depending on what group you're part of, you're going to attribute certain things to it, right? If you're, Catholic, you're going to do a hauntings, probably demonic. If it's over here, it might be just bad spiritual energy. There's a wide spectrum of what you're viewing this as. Now, did you ever experience, when you're talking about this dark energy, light energy, and kind of like your thoughts, did you ever experience anything in your home, anything that like was you born like paranormal, haunting type stuff, or was it strictly kind of more about people coming into your life that you kind of held these energies?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, my spaces were very, very pure because of the practices that I was doing. When people would walk into my house, they would be like, man, I've been stressed all day, but as soon as I walked in here, I just feel like this burden just lifted off my shoulders. There was times when like I'd be working with people, and if somebody put their hand on me, they would be like, oh my God, I feel this like energy pulsating off of you. Right. But it's like when you would go into a space of somebody that like was, maybe they could be smiling at you, but they have some inner turmoil where they're just really suffering, and they just, have this really dark energy. So it's like those energies would really kind of scare me in some senses, and keep in mind, I was living in Hollywood at the time. So
yeah, you're going to run into a lot of that.
Yeah. There was a lot of stuff.
For people who kind of haven't done this before, they're not really sure, like you can run into somebody and just get a weird vibe from them where you're like, something doesn't feel right. Like I'm in a room with someone, and I've had it happen a few times in my life where I'm like, something's wrong with that person. And I don't know what it is, but I don't want to be near you. Now there's that level. And then how would you say your level was because of what you were doing? Did you have any deeper insight into that and what that felt like? Or was it just a heightened awareness of that same feeling where you're like, I don't even want to be in the same room?
At that point, I think they describe it as, there's clairvoyant and then there's clairaudient or something. I can't remember the term.
There's a few of those.
But, it's one of them is when you can actually see things, and the other one is when you can hear things. And so a lot of times for me, what it was that I could, when I would make eye contact with someone, I would notice that their pupils would dilate. And I have no idea if that just means that they were more receptive to me, but their pupils would dilate, and then they would tell me that they had an issue, right, that they wanted to talk about. And when they would talk to me about that issue, I would literally just listen by meditating, right? So, there's like, your thoughts come in, right? And your thoughts are like, oh, blah, 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 blah. But just as you had described, like, I can't be in this room with this person. And then I would literally go into that meditative state, and I would let them express themselves. And once they would express themselves, like, I would just allow myself to talk. And I had no idea what I was saying, but whatever I was saying was very meaningful to them. And looking back at it now, I think some people would describe that as like channeling, right?
Okay.
And when I would do that, a lot of these people, that energy would dissipate. So if they had like this dark black energy, it's like that dark black energy would dissipate for the time being. And it's like I was really seeing this person that was coming out of this space being like, thank you so much. And they, in a way, it was like a healing energy that,
Okay.
I was able to provide for them. But to answer your question, I would see like a darker energy around them.
Oh, okay. And then when you said you got kind of like finally scared with it, you're like, I'm done with this. I don't want to do this anymore. Was there a particular event that happened where was the final like kind of nail in the coffin where you're like, I'm done with this? And was it that woman? And then when you were done with it, did you just stop practicing? And then that kind of helped alleviate all these extra sensory things that you had going on at that point? Or did you have to actively do anything to kind of get rid of it?
Well, it's I'm smiling because it's actually kind of, it's funny. So I'm just trying to think of how I can express this. At the time when I had gone through this, as I explained, I was living in Hollywood, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in Hollywood, I was extremely lonely, extremely. I mean, I couldn't get a date to save my life. Okay. Even though I was shredded, I had like an 8-pack, I was fit, I just could not even I just couldn't connect with anyone. So I told my manager at the time, I said, you know what? Listen, I was up for this show, and I was like really excited, because it was about a Pakistani guy. Right. And so I was like, oh my God, this is it. This is going to change my life. And I told him, I said, if I don't book this role, I'm selling everything and I'm moving to a rainforest somewhere and I'm going to sell coconuts to tourists. Right. And so he goes, okay, yeah, awesome. Great. And then I didn't talk to him for like a month. And I literally did that. I jumped on a plane and I moved to the rainforest of the Big Island. And I lived in the jungle. And I went there because you would expect, right, that you can go into a jungle in the middle of the Pacific Ocean and you have peace and you can really meditate and stuff, right? And boy, was I wrong. I literally was, I lost my path because this particular person, she followed me. She figured out where I was and she showed up.
God, dude.
Yeah. She showed up in the rainforest and she was sleeping in the jungle with wild boars while she was stalking me. It's crazy.
And that was it. You were like, man, I've lost it here. I'm going back.
Yeah, I lost my practices there because I got so stressed out. I started drinking, and I stopped doing those things, and I kind of came back to reality.
Do you think you'll ever go back to that again, or do you think you've had the experience and you're okay with not going back there?
No, I would love to. I'd love to get to that state of consciousness again because I think that's where we're all meant to operate. I think you, myself, anyone has the capability of doing that. It's just a matter of how we approach our energy management and our consciousness.
And you would feel not safe, but you'd feel okay doing that with a family and stuff. You feel like you still could commit that time, I guess, to it, or do you think it'd be more challenging or more things you'd have to safeguard so it doesn't spill over?
I think with all the distractions that we have in modern day times, social media, TV, news, just everything, right? I think it's very hard to go within, and I think going within is the greatest challenge, but it's the most rewarding thing I think someone can do for themselves.
For you, I guess, giving anybody advice, who's interested in doing this and thinking about going down this path, do you have any kind of recommendations or advice, so they could do it safely, they can do it to where, maybe they don't experience the same pitfalls that you did along the way since you've done it now? Do you have any, I guess, tips for those kind of people, or where to look to for the information? Because I know it's a dense topic and even you just kind of just talking about it now, it's like, it's much more involved than I kind of thought, where you sit down, just hum away and you're going to eventually get there,
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a very deep topic, but I would recommend that there's a million things I can say, right? But to be in service to others, I would say, definitely check out like a good book on meditation. And I personally, I think one of the best books for me, just the way I think, how logical I am, because I don't like a lot of the old esoteric terms, I like more modernistic terms, is Search Inside Yourself. I think it's such a great book. I think it's easy to relate to, easy to digest. I think reading Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. I think learning about Kundalini, is very beneficial to like awakening that energy within. And I think just having like a consistent practice, just doing it every day, waking up and just showing up every day for yourself. I think it's really important, because if you're in a state of turmoil, you really can't be there for others, people that you care about. So really give yourself that time and space to allow yourself to, go within and search inside yourself and then share with the world.
Well, I can't thank you enough for coming on and talking about this. I'd love to have you back on in the future if you're ever interested in talking about this or other subjects, because we get into a lot of weird stuff here. But I usually ask people, if, because people have a following and people like, have followers and like they put out different things. So I don't know if you want to do that based off the whole stalker past, but if you have any public accounts, where you don't mind people following you or you don't mind people contacting you, feel free. If you'd like to tell me now, it's fine. If you don't, you'd rather not and just keep privacy private, that's fine too.
Yeah. You can look me up. I have a website where I try to capture, the beauty that I experience. It's my first and last name, asimkaleem.com. I try to update that. I haven't really recently. You can check out my Instagram. It's Asim Photo. And then you can check me out on IMDb too. Some of my work is there, and, I'm working on my first screenplay. So, hopefully you guys can see that in theaters soon.
That's awesome.
But yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, sir. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Scott. It was a pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the subscribe button and give us a thumbs up. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter and our other social media platforms to stay updated with our latest content and join our awesome community. You can find the links right down below in the description, and also feel free to check out these suggested videos popping up right now. We'll see you at the next one. Learn, prepare, survive.